In a quiet corner of the galaxy, the peace had been untouched for centuries. This sector was known for its calm nature, with alien species living side by side, creating an ecosystem where trade and cooperation were the pillars of their success. There had never been any significant threats to their way of life. That was until the arrival. The first sign of danger came as a small flicker on the radar, unnoticed at first. Just another blip in the vast emptiness of space. However, the flicker grew larger, quickly becoming a well-defined shape. It wasn't just any spaceship. This was something big, and it was heading straight toward their sector. The alien fleet's command station went into action. A team of highly trained scouts and pilots was dispatched immediately to track the incoming ship. For hours, they tried to make sense of the readings. No ships from this part of space had ever been recorded before. The vessel didn't match any known designs in their databases. News of the unknown ship spread quickly through the sector. First, it was whispers between the alien races. Then, as it drew nearer, panic set in. The ship's massive size could be seen now from the surface of nearby planets. It was larger than any vessel they had ever encountered. Its shape was sleek, menacing, and unlike anything they had ever seen. Back at the command center, officers were scrambling to gather intelligence, but nothing seemed to make sense. The vessel didn't broadcast any signals, and it didn't respond to any hails. It simply moved forward, steadily, as though it had no regard for the chaos it was causing. It was clear that this ship wasn't here by accident. It had a purpose, and no one knew what that was. As the ship's enormous shadow stretched across the skies of nearby planets, the entire sector went into lockdown. Every station, every fleet was put on high alert. The peaceful, prosperous sector was now a war zone waiting to happen. The alien species had never faced anything like this before. Some were frightened, others skeptical, but all were on edge. Among the first to react were the leaders of the largest galactic factions. They gathered quickly in a virtual council meeting. Tensions were high as each leader offered their opinion. Some urged caution, suggesting that it could be a simple misunderstanding, while others believed it was an attack in the making. Each leader offered a different theory about the intentions of this strange new force. One of the most powerful species, the Vucarians, had the largest fleet in the sector. Their ambassador, Commander Zurich, was known for his aggressive tactics and quick decisions. He wasted no time and demanded that the fleet move into position. "We must show strength," he said. "If they are hostile, they will know we are ready." Meanwhile, the Iranians, a peaceful race known for their wisdom, took a different approach. Ambassador Lyra suggested sending a diplomatic envoy. "We can't act out of fear," she reasoned. "We must find out what they want. Only then can we decide how to respond." In the midst of this growing confusion, another ship was launched. This time, it wasn't a fleet or an ambassadorial ship. It was a scout ship, meant to gather more information. Its captain, a young and ambitious officer named Velen, had been given a chance to prove himself. His task was simple: get close enough to the unknown ship to scan it, but not so close as to provoke a response. As Velen's scout ship made its way toward the massive warship, the crew aboard could feel the weight of the situation. Every scan, every reading, sent back to the command center only raised more questions. The ship was unlike anything they had ever seen. It wasn't just its size or design. It was the materials it was made from. The scouts were unable to identify what it was made of. It was as if the ship was made from a material that didn't exist in their galaxy. For hours, the scout ship crept closer. Then, as it drew near the massive vessel, something happened. A single, low-frequency signal was received. It wasn't a normal communication. It was more of a pulse, an echo through the ship's systems. It was a message, but not in any language they understood. The message sent a chill through Velen's crew. They quickly sent it back to the command center for analysis. However, before the message could be fully decoded, something else happened. The massive warship's lights flickered, and then, without warning, it moved. It moved faster than any ship they had encountered. It wasn't just idling in space anymore. It was heading toward their sector, toward their planets. The scout ship's crew watched in shock as the alien warship moved at an incredible speed, more than triple the speed of anything they thought possible. It was clear that this ship wasn't just big, it was powerful. This was no mere diplomatic envoy, it was a war vessel. Back at the command center, panic began to set in. The leaders were now convinced this was an attack, but no one knew how to respond. Zurich, the Vucarian commander, stood up and slammed his fist on the table. We cannot wait any longer. We must take action now. Lyra, the Iranian ambassador, tried to keep calm. We don't know their intentions. There must be another way. But the room was filled with tension, and Zurich's words carried weight. As the alien warship continued its course toward the sector, Velen's scout ship sent back its final report. The warship's engines were powering up, and the massive structure seemed ready for battle. The unknown ship had not communicated in any known language, but its actions spoke volumes. The decision was made. The fleet would be assembled, and the sector would prepare for war. The aliens in the sector had no idea what was coming. They had never faced anything like the human war vessel. But one question remained. Why were the humans here? What did they want? Was this an invasion, or had something more dangerous begun? The peace they had known for so long had been shattered. The galaxy would never be the same again. As the countdown to battle began, all eyes were on the human war vessel. Would it unleash devastation upon them all, or was there more to this story than anyone knew? The silence in the command room was palpable as the alien leaders watched the giant human warship approach. The tension was thick, and each passing second seemed to stretch on forever. Every species in the sector had gathered to discuss the situation, but their debate was growing increasingly frantic. There were many questions, but no answers, yet. Where are they going? One of the alien ambassadors, a Zoran, asked nervously. His species was known for its intelligence, but this was beyond their understanding. None of their ships could move as fast as the human warship. None could approach the peaceful sector with such purpose. We don't know, replied Lyra, the Iranian ambassador, keeping her calm. She had always been the voice of reason, but even her steady demeanor was faltering now. We need to learn more before jumping to conclusions. Commander Zurich, the Vucarian, slammed his hand on the table. We know enough. It's a warship. Its arrival is no coincidence. This could be the beginning of an invasion. We must be ready to defend ourselves. But even as he spoke, something strange happened. The human warship, which had been closing in on the sector with terrifying speed, suddenly slowed down. Its massive engines, which had been emitting a low hum, stopped completely. The ship floated motionless in the vastness of space. The silence was deafening. It wasn't the silence of peace, but the eerie quiet that came with anticipation. Why had the warship stopped? Why wasn't it attacking? On the ground, life continued as normal, but the fear in the air was undeniable. Civilian ships paused mid-flight, unsure whether they should flee or prepare to defend themselves. Military forces scrambled to set up defenses in case the worst happened. Everyone was watching the warship, waiting for its next move. The Iranians quickly sent out a small diplomatic envoy, hoping to make contact with the human warship. Their leader, Lyra, advocated for communication over confrontation. We must understand their purpose, she had said. We can't act out of fear. But the human warship didn't respond. In fact, nothing about the ship indicated that it had even noticed the envoy. Instead, a strange phenomenon occurred. One of the outer doors of the warship slowly opened, releasing a massive, deep red glow. It wasn't a weapon or an explosion. It was more like a signal, a beacon. At the Iranian command center, the team worked frantically to decipher the beacon's signal. For hours, they tried everything they knew, using every type of equipment available. But still, nothing came through. The signal was like a wall of static, undecodable, untranslatable. It's like they're speaking in a code we don't understand. an Iranian technician said in frustration. Back on the warship, the crew remained entirely silent, yet every single person aboard the alien ships felt a sense of unease growing. Whatever was happening out there, the human warship was not acting like anything they had ever encountered. The usual tactics didn't seem to apply. But what was most unnerving was the feeling that they were being watched. Every race in the sector felt it, a sensation that crawled under their skin. The feeling that this warship, their mysterious enemy, was not only there to invade, but to study, to observe. The debate in the command room grew louder as more and more factions sent ships to investigate the strange signal. Despite the diplomatic envoy's best efforts to open communication, they were met with dead silence. It was as if the ship didn't care for their presence. "Why aren't they answering?" asked Zurich, now more unsettled than ever. "We've sent everything. Why don't they engage?" Lyra remained calm but puzzled. It's as if they don't want to talk. Just then, another transmission came through, this one entirely unexpected. It wasn't a transmission from the human warship itself, but from a ship that had been following it, hiding in the shadows. A small scout ship, barely noticeable against the backdrop of the massive warship, had managed to stay undetected until now. "Commander Zurich," the Iranian technician shouted, "we've picked up a signal from a hidden ship. It's human. We can't believe we missed it." The tension in the room skyrocketed. The mystery had deepened. The fact that a second ship had been tracking them raised more questions. What did it mean? Who was aboard? Was it a scouting ship, or was it part of a larger plan? Lyra glanced at Zurich, who nodded grimly. "We need to find out who they are, what they want. We can't afford to wait any longer." As the debate continued, the scout ship sent a new transmission. This time, it wasn't static. It wasn't a signal either. It was a single, simple message. "We are not here to conquer. We are here to offer a chance." For a moment, there was silence as the words echoed through the speakers of the command center. Everyone in the room stopped, processing the message. Offer a chance. To whom? Why? And what did they mean? The next transmission, however, answered more questions, just not in the way anyone expected. The human warship opened its enormous doors once again, this time sending a larger pulse of energy, shaking the surrounding ships and even some of the nearby planets. But instead of a hostile attack, something else happened. A single figure emerged from the door, a human figure. Dressed in simple, but unmistakably military attire, the figure stood tall, their presence commanding. The alien leaders watched in shock as the human slowly floated towards the edge of the door. This was no normal human soldier. This was someone important. Someone who was not afraid of the vast unknown. As the figure reached out their hand, a booming voice echoed across the galaxy. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. "We offer you the chance to survive," the voice called, "but only if you have the courage to face what's coming next." At those words, the galaxy held its breath. The words from the human soldier echoed through the communication channels, leaving a strange silence in their wake. "We offer you the chance to survive, but only if you have the courage to face what's coming next." What did that mean? Was it a warning? A threat? Or something entirely different? The alien leaders gathered in the command room, staring at each other in confusion and concern. Lyra, the Iranian ambassador, was the first to break the silence. What do they mean by that? What could be so dangerous that it would require their intervention? Commander Zurich clenched his fists. "Whatever it is, we're not ready for it. And if it's something worse than us, we're in even more trouble." His voice was laced with fear, something that didn't often show on the tough, battle-hardened Vucarian. There was no doubt now. This was not an ordinary human force. This wasn't just some ship wandering into the sector by mistake. The timing of their arrival was too precise, the message too cryptic. Whatever was coming, the humans seemed to know about it. They had prepared for it, and it was coming fast. "We need to know everything about that warship," Lyra said, her voice determined. Who is this soldier? What does he know? What does he mean by the chance to survive? And most importantly, what's coming next? As the alien leaders discussed their options, an emergency transmission from one of the nearby planets interrupted. All ships, prepare for immediate action, a voice shouted across the airwaves, sending a wave of panic throughout the room. We've just received intel. The enemy is closer than we thought. Suddenly, the alien factions understood the gravity of the situation. They'd assumed the human warship was their problem. But it wasn't. It had arrived to prepare them for something much worse, a much more terrifying enemy, one that had been hidden in the shadows until now. The scout ship that had been tracking the human warship, now fully visible to the aliens, sent a series of rapid-fire transmissions. It was moving closer and closer to the warship, drawing nearer to the unknown threat. The data it sent was highly classified, encrypted, and even more mysterious than the human message itself. The alien leader's eyes widened as they decoded the message. "It's true," Zurich muttered, his voice hoarse. "It's coming. The thing they've been hiding from us. The one we thought was a myth." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about, Commander?" "The Deathborn," Zurich replied. "The nightmare species. We've heard stories about them, but none of us believed they existed. But it seems like they do." The room fell into a stunned silence. The Deathborn were a race of nightmarish creatures, known only through fragmented legends. They were said to be ruthless, terrifying, and utterly unstoppable. Entire civilizations had been wiped out just by their presence. No one had ever seen one, but the tales were enough to make any species tremble. "If they're real," Lyra began, her voice shaky but resolute, "then we have no hope. Not without help." Zurich nodded. "That's where the humans come in. They're the only ones who might know how to stop the Deathborn." Just as he spoke, another transmission came through, this time from the human warship itself. But it wasn't a message. It was a signal. A bright flash of light illuminated the stars around the warship, sending a warning through every system in the sector. The humans were preparing for something massive. But there was no time to decipher the message. The ships in the sector began to move, locking their weapons systems and preparing for battle. Their radar systems started to pick up signals. Unmistakable, terrifying signals. The Deathborn were close. Lyra turned to Zurich. "How do we prepare for something like this? How do we stand a chance?" Zurich, usually brimming with confidence, seemed unsure. "We don't. We can only hope that the humans know something we don't. If we survive this, it will be because of them." In the command center, the tension was unbearable. But even as the alien factions scrambled to prepare, they could all feel it. Something was coming. Something terrible. And they weren't ready. The air in the command center felt thick, heavy with the weight of impending disaster. Alien leaders gathered around the large table, their minds racing as the full scope of the threat began to sink in. "This is it," Commander Zurich said grimly. "The Deathborn are real, and they're coming for us." Lyra was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the holographic map before her. The red blips indicating the Deathborn's location were rapidly approaching, and there was nothing they could do to stop them. Her mind raced as she thought about the consequences of their arrival. "How could we have missed this?" she muttered to herself. "How did we not know?" Zurich looked at her, his voice harsh. "We were too focused on our own conflicts, too blind to see the bigger picture. And now we're paying the price." The other alien leaders stood in silence, each one struggling to process the magnitude of the situation. Some had heard rumors of the Deathborn, whispers of a species so dangerous that entire fleets had been obliterated by them. But rumors were just that, rumors. No one truly believed it until now. Lyra turned to the communication officer. "What's the status on the human warship?" The officer quickly punched a series of buttons, bringing up the human vessel's information on the screen. The warship was positioned near the edge of the sector, its powerful sensors scanning the surrounding space. "They're waiting," the officer said, voice tight. They haven't moved, but they're actively monitoring the situation. Waiting for what? Zurich demanded. Are they just going to sit there while we all die? Perhaps they know something we don't, Lyra said, her voice calm but filled with uncertainty. Maybe they have a plan. But Zurich wasn't convinced. A plan, he scoffed. Or maybe they just don't care. They arrived, and now they're watching us squirm. As the alien leaders continued their heated discussion, the sensor technician's voice broke through the tension. Commander, we got a new signal. It's coming from the human warship. Everyone fell silent as the technician worked to bring the signal up on the main screen. A series of flashes appeared, each one brighter than the last, before settling into a message. Prepare yourselves. The human voice boomed over the comms. The Deathborn are coming. There is only one way to survive. The message was brief, but it sent waves of unease through the room. Every alien in the command center felt it. There was something terrifying about the way the humans spoke. It wasn't a boast or a threat. It was a warning, and it was meant for them. Lyra's stomach churned as she stared at the words flashing across the screen. There is only one way to survive. What does that mean? Zurich demanded, his voice growing more urgent. What are they trying to tell us? The message ended abruptly, leaving nothing but a heavy silence in its wake. Lyra turned back to the holographic map, her mind racing. The Deathborn ships were now only a few light years away, and with every passing moment, the alien forces grew more desperate. They were ill-prepared, outmatched, and they knew it. Do you think the humans can stop them? Lyra asked quietly, turning to Zurich. Zurich gritted his teeth. I don't know, but if they can, we need to make sure we're ready to fight alongside them. No one is going to survive if we don't. The alien fleet scrambled to prepare for battle, but the fear was evident in every movement. Weapons were checked, shields were powered up, and the readiness of their ships was tested. But no matter what they did, they knew it wouldn't be enough. The Deathborn weren't just another enemy. They were something far worse. They were a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. And now, they were closing in. Suddenly, the alarms blared. A deep, rumbling sound filled the air as the Deathborn ships appeared on the edge of the sector. They were enormous, monstrous, dark shapes that blotted out the stars. It was as if the very universe recoiled at their presence. Lyra's heart raced in her chest. They were here. As the Deathborn ships began to move, an eerie silence fell over the alien fleet. The once boasting commanders now stood at attention, their faces pale, their minds consumed with dread. And then, the human warship moved. With a sudden surge, the human ship cut through the space between the fleet and the approaching Deathborn. Its engines roared, a deep, powerful sound that seemed to shake the very fabric of the sector. Prepare for impact. The human commander's voice came through the comms, calm and steady, despite the chaos around him. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. They were going to fight. The entire sector was vibrating as the Deathborn ships closed in, their dark, hulking forms growing larger on the radar. A sense of impending doom filled the air in the alien command center. But Lyra could barely focus on anything except the flickering image of the human warship cutting through the void. It was moving toward the Deathborn fleet, fearless in the face of certain destruction. Commander, the Deathborn are charging their weapons, the sensor technician said, his voice shaky. The alien fleet was already trying to mobilize, but the terrifying reality was sinking in. They were too slow, too outgunned, and outclassed. They're firing. The screen flared with red light as the Deathborn opened fire, massive beams of energy streaking through space. The alien fleet scrambled to respond, but there was no way they could evade the sheer destructive power of the Deathborn's weapons. Shields up, Zurich barked, but his words were drowned out by the explosions that rocked the command center as the first salvo from the Deathborn fleet hit the alien defenses. Lyra's hands clenched into fists. The battle had begun, and already the odds were against them. She had been in wars before, but nothing like this. The Deathborn weren't just soldiers. They were a storm of destruction, annihilating everything in their path. And now, the aliens were part of that path. But then, through the chaos, something unexpected happened. The human warship, which had been hanging in the background like a silent observer, suddenly sprang to life. In an instant, the human vessel surged forward, its engines firing with a power that made the rest of the fleet's engines seem weak in comparison. The human warship cut through space like a razor blade, a streak of bright light racing toward the Deathborn ships. "They're going straight for the heart of the fleet," Zurich muttered, his voice full of disbelief. "What are they thinking?" "They're not thinking," Lyra replied, barely able to speak through the intensity of the moment. "They're acting." The human warship's weapons powered up as it closed in on the first Deathborn ship. In a single, blinding flash, the human vessel fired, sending a stream of deadly projectiles toward the enemy. The impact was immediate. The Deathborn ship staggered under the force of the attack, and for the first time, the alien commanders saw the Deathborn falter. The human warship was no longer just a bystander. It was a weapon, a force that seemed to defy everything the aliens thought they knew about warfare. The Deathborn weren't expecting this kind of aggression. The human warship didn't simply attack. It seemed to speak the language of destruction with terrifying precision. The first Deathborn ship, though massive, was not invincible. The human weapons tore through its armor like paper, and before long, the ship was engulfed in flames, its hulking form twisting and breaking apart. The alien fleet watched in stunned silence. It was happening. The humans were fighting the Deathborn, and they were winning. This can't be real," Zurich breathed, his eyes fixed on the carnage unfolding on the screen. "They actually did it." "Not yet," Lyra replied, her voice grim. "The Deathborn will retaliate, but they didn't expect the humans to come for them head-on." Just as she spoke, the Deathborn retaliated with full force. Beams of raw energy shot from their ships, ripping through space at breakneck speed. The human warship dodged and weaved through the barrage with deadly grace, every movement calculated and precise. The humans were not just surviving. They were fighting back with every ounce of their strength. And then something extraordinary happened. The human warship didn't just attack, it coordinated. Alien ships, who were initially on the sidelines, suddenly found themselves joining the human assault. Ships that had been holding back, unsure of how to face the Deathborn, now saw an opportunity. Lyra watched in disbelief as alien fleets aligned themselves with the humans, forming a united front. It was clear the humans had sparked something in them. The alien ships fired in unison with the human warship, their combined firepower creating a wall of energy so intense that it seemed to disintegrate the space around them. The Deathborn didn't stand a chance. The combined forces were overwhelming, and for the first time in a long while, hope began to spread through the ranks of the alien fleet. "Keep the pressure on them," Zurich shouted as his ship joined the human-led assault. "We can win this." The Deathborn, now realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. But the humans wouldn't allow them to escape. The human warship closed in, its weapons firing in quick succession, relentless in their pursuit. Lyra's heart pounded as the Deathborn ships began to break apart, one after another, unable to withstand the onslaught from both the human and alien forces. For the first time in this war, the Deathborn were on the run. It was a victory, but it came at a cost. The battle was far from over, and the Deathborn weren't easily beaten. But what the human warship had done was nothing short of extraordinary. They had struck fear into the heart of the Deathborn, and in doing so, they had united their enemies. Lyra knew one thing for sure: the war had changed. And as the dust began to settle, she realized that they now had a chance. A real chance to survive. The remnants of the Deathborn fleet were scattered across the sector, their once formidable warships now burning wrecks, drifting helplessly in space. The human warship, though damaged, was still operational, its powerful engines pushing it toward the core of the enemy's territory. The alien fleet, now fighting alongside the humans, had a new sense of unity and purpose. Their fear had been replaced by resolve, but there was still uncertainty in the air. The Deathborn weren't defeated yet. Lyra watched the stars through the viewing port, her mind racing. They had won the first clash, but the Deathborn had retreated, strategically, not out of weakness. Every part of her knew that this was only a temporary respite, and the real battle had yet to begin. "We've got to keep pushing." Zarek's voice crackled over the comms, dragging Lyra's thoughts back to the present. The Deathborn aren't going to sit idly by. We need to secure the sector before they regroup. "Agreed," Lyra replied, her voice hard. "Let's make sure we don't give them a chance to retaliate." The alien fleet, now more determined than ever, followed the lead of the human vessel. Their ships, once hesitant, now aligned perfectly with the humans. This was no longer a mere battle. This was the first step in an all-out war against a much stronger foe. The tension was palpable as they made their way deeper into enemy territory. Lyra's fingers drummed anxiously on the armrest of her chair. There was a growing sense of urgency now. The Deathborn, as terrifying and merciless as they were, weren't going to allow this invasion to go unchallenged. As the fleet moved into the heart of the Deathborn's territory, Lyra could feel it. The air around them was heavy with the anticipation of a clash so violent it could rip entire worlds apart. The battle for survival wasn't just about defeating the Deathborn. It was about proving to the galaxy that they could stand against the might of an invincible enemy. The human warship, still at the forefront, was already engaging in tactical maneuvers, sending waves of firepower toward enemy ships. The Deathborn weren't holding back any longer. They had regrouped and were launching their counterattack with terrifying speed. It was clear that they had underestimated the human warship before, but now they had learned their lesson. "We're not out of the woods yet," Zarek's voice came through again, though this time it was strained, filled with the weight of what was at stake. "They're massing their forces. We need to hold the line, or we're done." Lyra's heart pounded as she glanced at the tactical screen. The Deathborn were closing in. Massive ships were pouring out of hidden space stations, their weapons charged and ready for the fight of their lives. The battle was far from over. It was only just beginning. In the distance, the human warship fired again, its weapons like lightning, cutting through the darkness. The Deathborn responded with an equal fury, their own weapons lighting up the expanse of space. The two forces collided with a deafening crash of energy beams, each one echoing across the sector. The battle was a violent, chaotic dance, ships dodging, weaving, exploding in fiery blossoms of death. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the human warship would be overwhelmed. The Deathborn were relentless, their ships growing in number and strength as they closed in. But the humans, with their unmatched precision and tactical brilliance, held their ground. Lyra watched in awe as the human warship spun and twisted through the assault, firing back with pinpoint accuracy, destroying the Deathborn's front lines one by one. "They're holding," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "They're holding the line." But even as she spoke those words, the Deathborn adapted. Their tactics grew more sophisticated, their attacks more coordinated. It wasn't enough to just hold the line anymore. They had to push forward. "We're not done yet," Lyra said, her voice gaining strength. "Tell the fleet to regroup. We need to get in close and finish this." "Right," Zarek responded. "All ships, move into formation. We're going to bring the fight to them." The alien fleet, now completely aligned with the humans, surged forward. The human warship led the charge, its engines roaring as it cut through the space between them and the Deathborn forces. The air was thick with tension. The Deathborn were closing in on the humans' position, but this time, the humans weren't backing down. For the first time, the Deathborn were beginning to falter. The humans had forced their way into the heart of their territory, and with every enemy ship that fell, the fear that had once dominated the galaxy was slowly beginning to dissolve. But the Deathborn weren't just going to give up. They had a powerful weapon of their own, a weapon that they had been saving for just this moment. As the humans advanced, a new wave of Deathborn ships appeared, larger and more dangerous than anything they had encountered before. These ships were no longer just vehicles of war. They were designed for one purpose only: to crush the human resistance once and for all. "Brace yourselves," Zurich warned. "We're in for the fight of our lives." The new wave of Deathborn ships was upon them in an instant. These behemoths, armored and armed to the teeth, surged toward the human fleet. The battle had escalated. The stakes had never been higher. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The fate of the sector, of the galaxy, seemed to hinge on this one moment. Would the humans prevail, or would the Deathborn crush them beneath their heel? Lyra's eyes narrowed. This was their chance. If they could take down the Deathborn's new flagship, they could break the back of the entire fleet. But it wouldn't be easy. The universe held its breath as the Deathborn's flagship loomed larger, its monstrous shape slowly closing in on the human and alien fleets. Every single ship in the fleet knew this was the final push. If they lost this battle, the Deathborn would crush them without mercy. But if they won, they could push the invaders out of the sector, and perhaps end the Deathborn's campaign of terror for good. Lyra stood at the bridge, her fingers gripping the armrest, her breath steady but her mind racing. The enemy flagship's shields were practically impenetrable. They had tried everything. Every missile, every bomb, every last-ditch effort to break through. But it stood firm like an unmovable mountain. "Captain," Zurich's voice broke through the tension. "It's now or never. We have to hit their core. If we can breach that, the flagship will go down." Lyra nodded sharply, her mind already calculating the steps needed. "Set the course," she said. "All ships, follow the human warship. We go for the heart of their flagship." "Understood, Captain." She turned her attention back to the view screen, where the Deathborn ships were massing, ready for the final push. The time for retreat was long past. The human warship had become more than just a vessel of war. It had become a symbol of hope, not just for humans, but for the entire galaxy. The alien fleet, once reluctant, had grown into a force to be reckoned with. Their confidence had risen in direct proportion to the success of their alliance with the humans. Their once distrustful eyes now looked to the human warship with admiration, but there was no time to celebrate. The human ship cut through the space between them and the Deathborn's flagship, weaving and dodging through a sea of fire. The Deathborn were relentless. Every attack aimed directly at the human ship. Their warships, massive and deadly, opened fire from every direction, but the human ship danced around the attacks, its skilled crew evading death with precision. "Ready the final assault," Lyra shouted, her voice carrying across the bridge. "This is our only chance." Zurich's voice crackled over the comms. "Charging weapons. We're about to make history, Captain." Lyra clenched her fists, knowing full well that this moment would define the fate of the sector, of the galaxy. Everything came down to this. The human warship, with its alien allies, was about to make the final strike. The flagship's shields flickered, shimmering with each blast. Lyra could see the edge of their defenses weakening. The human warship was so close now. Just a few more moments, and they would be in striking range. The crew braced themselves. The fire from the Deathborn was intense, but it wasn't enough. They had underestimated the humans' resilience and the power of their technology. The human ship drew closer, and every second felt like an eternity. A soft hum filled the bridge as the energy required to pierce through the flagship's defenses built up. "Now," Lyra shouted, "hit them with everything we've got." A massive burst of energy shot from the human warship, ripping through space with blinding light. The enemy flagship's shields shattered in an instant, like glass breaking under an unstoppable force. The blast tore through the core of the massive Deathborn ship, causing it to convulse as massive explosions rippled outward. It was as if the very heart of the Deathborn had been ripped out. "Target hit," Zarek called out, his voice filled with awe. The flagship's going down. The Deathborn flagship began to collapse in on itself. Fires erupted from the hull as the massive vessel groaned under the strain. The human warship continued its assault, keeping the pressure on as the Deathborn flagship systems failed one by one. The ship's lights flickered and died, and it started to break apart in the vacuum of space. Victory, Lyra whispered to herself. We've done it. But their victory was bittersweet. The Deathborn fleet, now leaderless, began to retreat, but the damage had already been done. The sector would never be the same. The victory had cost them dearly, and the scars of this battle would last forever. Yet there was no denying that the galaxy would now see the humans not just as survivors, but as warriors who had turned the tide against the mightiest invaders the galaxy had ever known. Lyra looked at her crew, and for the first time since the war began, she allowed herself a small smile. This is just the beginning. We've proven what we can do together. Zarek nodded, looking at the shattered remnants of the Deathborn flagship. It's just the beginning. But for now, Captain, we've won. The human warship, its hull battered but unbowed, drifted amid the wreckage of the Deathborn's flagship, a symbol of defiance, of survival, and of the unyielding spirit of humanity. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible. The Deathborn had come to conquer, to destroy, but it was the humans who had won the day, and the future was now a little brighter for all.